we are now broadcasting and we're going to wait for the room to fill up. I can see it's happening. Hello, everybody. Okay. Okay, and one more. Filling up, give it a little bit more time. Started at like 12:30, 12:31. Hi, John. Everyone who's in the chat right now, or in the room right now, I've gone ahead and put some ground rules in the chat function, which is at the right of your screen. We're super excited to have everyone joining us today, and I'm just going to give it one more minute before I get started here. Thanks for being here today, everyone. We'd love to know where you're joining us from, too. If you want to go ahead and drop your location in the chat room, that would be awesome. Another Bay Area person. Oh, Midtown NYC. All right.
That was me.
Yeah. Sandra's holding it down for the East Coast. Got Mohan here, our colleague. He's playing backup in case we have any technical difficulties. He can also jump in. He is all-knowing when it comes to tech stuff.
Hi, everyone.
If I screw up any answers, he'll jump in and save me, right?
Yes, yes.
So we're pleased to have a lot of our friends join us today. Alex, Chantal, many others. Sunny.
Yes. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started here. I'm going to just pull up our slides quickly. Great, okay. Give me 1 second, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the Hive Data Think Tank webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today we're going to discuss data stewardship in an AI-driven world. My name is Maddie Watt, and I lead people and programs at the Hive. First, I'm going to briefly discuss the ground rules for today's webinar interaction before I explain what the Hive Think Tank does, and then I'm going to pass our virtual microphone over to TM Ravi, the Hive's founder and managing director, and today's moderator. So I've already gone ahead and posted this in the chat box, which is going to be located at the right of your screen once you pull up the chat feature, which is a button at the bottom of your screen. So just as a reminder, chat rules. Please be respectful in the chat and please refrain from product plugs. We love questions. So when you ask a question, please use the Q&A function, which is a button at the bottom of the screen to ask your presenter questions. You can upvote questions that you want to see answered. And just so you guys know, this session is being recorded and will be available to view later on the Hive's YouTube channel, which I have gone ahead and sent over the chat, and I will send that again at the end of this webinar. If you're going to follow along or contribute on Twitter, and we hope you are, please use the hashtag HiveData. And we would love if you want to drop in where you're joining from today over in the chat function. That would be awesome. We want to say hi to everyone from around the world. And also, please join us next Wednesday on the 6th at 11 a.m. for CIO Insights, the future of post-pandemic work. I'm going to send over the URL to sign up for that. And the Hive Think Tank. So what is the Hive Think Tank? We are an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, corporations, and thought leaders. We are a content and event platform, and right now we are bringing you virtual events every week. We talk about a lot of different things, including AI, blockchain, enterprise, industrials, fintech and insurtech, health, 5G, and entrepreneurship. And here is the event graphic for next week's webinar. We hope you can join us.
The slide is not changing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Let's see here. Thanks, Robbie, for letting me know.
But I can walk you through it. So next Wednesday we have an event. It's a CIO event, and it's focused on how work and the workplace will look like as we sort of come back. And so with that, maybe there you have it.
There we go. Thanks to our sponsors. And then now, Ravi, if you want to go ahead and tell a little bit more about the Hive before introducing our panelists, that would be great. Thanks, guys.
You just go to the next slide. Great. So the Hive is a venture studio focused on applications of AI in the enterprise in a few key vertical segments. And you'll see financial services there, and something that we'll talk about today. And a lot of the focus here that we have is basically how do we drive digital transformation? How do we reduce risk and increase resilience? How do we drive innovation using a bunch of techniques that fall in the general umbrella of AI? And if you go to the next slide, Maddie. And so that's just a flavor of some of our companies. And if you go to the next slide, you'll basically, so if you're going to tweet about the event today, please use the hashtag HiveData. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce the two panelists today, Sandra Nadelman, who is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Chase, and Ashok Srivastava, the SVP and Chief Data Officer of Intuit. And before we sort of jump in, what I thought we could kind of do is both Chase and Intuit have been very involved with consumers, with small businesses in helping with the response to COVID-19. And so maybe starting with you, Sandra, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you folks are doing?
Yeah, clearly the COVID pandemic has had far-reaching influence on, clearly our country, but worldwide. And as we look at both our small businesses as well as our consumer customers, there are a lot of challenges. We look to what the government and regulation has required to do. So obviously we've implemented the Paycheck Protection Program and have been granting loans at scale for several weeks now to our small business customers. But above and beyond that, I think we've committed something like $150, $200 million to supporting small businesses in underserved communities to make sure that even they get funding. And from a customer perspective, we've been doing things like deferring loan payments, waiving fees, to make sure that people can get out of these, couple of weeks of dire straits and be able to come out the other end as still having a vibrant, healthy community.
Ashok?
It's great to be here. Intuit is working in a number of areas to help small businesses and consumers, because this COVID-19 pandemic, I don't need to say it, but it's catastrophic in terms of the amount of impact it's having on these companies around the globe. The PPP program that Sandra mentioned is one of them areas that we're pursuing, and we're really happy to be able to launch and help people get access to the capital that they need. But we're also starting to look at the data that we have and understand some of the other changes that might be happening to small businesses and consumers. And that's something that's pretty important for us as we're moving forward.
Great. Sandra, how are you keeping busy when you're not working on Chase? Any binge-worthy episodes, streaming media that you've discovered?
I'm trying to go back to some of the old school TV shows where I can then binge entire series, because at this point we've got lots of free time on our hands. And so one of the more recent ones was actually Star Trek Enterprise, which is pretty underrated. In reading the reviews, I thought it'd be a heck of a lot worse, and it was actually pretty good and pretty interesting. Very different from the other Star Trek series, but I enjoyed it.
Ashok?
Yeah, so we've been watching kind of a mix of things. One of them is called War of the Worlds. It came out, I think, last year on Epix, and it's actually extremely well done. I think they've released one series of it, and we watched the whole set of episodes. It's very well done because it kind of shows you a lot about character development throughout the whole set of episodes, but then also how people think in terms of attacks and ambiguity. And there are a lot of parallels to that movie or that set of episodes and what we're going through. And then the other side of it is watching HGTV. So we spend a lot of time having HGTV, watching the invariable couple coming, finding the house that they like, renovating it, moving it. And it's a very nice, happy kind of thing to watch during this pandemic.
Mine has been Babylon, Berlin. It takes place in the Weimar Republic time. I highly recommend it. In addition to that, La Casa de Papel, the House of Money. So with that, maybe we'll jump in. So the space that both of you are in has been incredibly exciting for the last 10 years or so. You know, data and data-related techniques like AI have driven incredible kind of customer experiences and kind of really delivering kind of financial services to consumers at their fingertips in a frictionless manner at any time, wherever they are. And so there is this old adage that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And so as consumers were sort of okay with the sort of with a lot of use of their data in exchange for free services. And as there is more and more awareness about that data, that stance has changed. How have you adapted and your company adapted to that?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I mean, as a bank, the thing is that our products are not free. They come at a cost. So we've never been in the position where we've needed to take customers' data in order to directly monetize it. But what I would say is that the broader push towards customers understanding that data is being used and is monetized in different ways has made all of us more cognizant of making sure that customers are deeply aware of what data is being collected, why it's being collected, how it's being used, and to the extent we can, giving them choice about whether data is being used or retained. And the more we can give transparency and choice, we feel like we are doing well by our customers, even in using data for the main purposes of being a financial institution.
And there's always a kind of it's never kind of black and white. There's always kind of a line there. Like take kind of the discussion happening these days, which is if you're willing to share your location data and download an app, perhaps you'll be allowed to come into work or come into a grocery store. Or if you maybe in a financial service or insurance context, if you share your location, maybe you'll get a discount at a better rate. So it's sometimes that helps make better decisions.
Yeah, and these things they're extremely personal decisions. We've done a lot of customer research on this in particular, and different customers are at different places in their lives in terms of how much they're willing to give away data for service and trusting different institutions with that data. And by the way, to your point, it's contextual. In the middle of a pandemic, they may be more apt to do it for certain things, but they may want to rescind that right 2 weeks later. And as companies, we have to make decisions with best efforts, knowing the broad scope of the population. You're never going to make 100% of people happy. There are still customers who refuse to operate digitally because they don't want a digital footprint. We still serve them in non-digital ways, and that's okay. But we try to make decisions with the broad scope of the population and broad customer expectation in mind, not just regulation.
Ashok?
Yeah, so at Intuit, we don't sell data, first and foremost. And so the data that we have from our tax products or the data that we have from QuickBooks or any of the other part of our ecosystem is used first and foremost to help improve the customer experience. And the way we do that is we have the data. It goes through various privacy and security guidelines. We make sure that we're well within those purviews. And then we think about new kinds of models, machine learning models, AI models, other types of analytics that could be deployed that actually help, let's say, the small business user do better in their financial lives or help a consumer make better decision in his or her financial lives, because that's really where the payoff occurs. We're in unprecedented times today where people are facing uncertainties that we really couldn't dream of only 2 months ago. And it's more critical now than ever that people be armed with correct information, the right information at the right time, recommendations that are based on data. And so we're trying to build those capabilities and then deploy them in a way that can serve our customers in the best possible way.
Thank you. So just on the same kind of line, the consumer companies, Facebook, Google, Amazon, have just delivered these incredible customer experiences, personalization that has sort of driven kind of engagement, and something that we as consumers have gotten used to. And business has been a kind of a laggard. When you go to work, your experience is not quite the same as it is at home. And so this is less a question about privacy. It's really around data and personalization. How are you, Ashok, thinking about sort of delivering those kinds of sort of personal experiences and that kind of amazing kind of customer experience?
Yeah, what a great question, and what a great platform to talk about it in the context of taxes. So taxes are inherently extremely impersonal. To give you an idea, the US tax code is 80,000 pages long. And simply the act of trying to understand what those 80,000 pages say is an entire career unto itself. What to say about a personalized experience? But we're in the business of trying to create personalized tax experiences. So here's how we do it. First thing, we've built a knowledge engine capability that can automatically, in a sense, ingest the US tax code and generate computer code. This is a phenomenal capability, in my opinion. That knowledge engineering capability gives us the ability to do personalization for an individual. So for example, this is a classic example that we use. Let's say that a person living in New York City who's 20 years old and is a barista signs up to use a tax software like TurboTax. Now, if we're going to follow the standard flow, one of the things that we'd be asking them is whether they have any retirement railroad income. Now, it's possible that this 20-year-old person in New York has it, but chances are no. We have the ability, using the knowledge engineering system that we've built, to essentially take all the information that we know about the person so far, 20 years old, living in New York, barista, and use that information to make inferences about what is probably true and what's also probably not true. And this leads to a highly personalized experience, and we're deploying this at scale. That's one area, and that's a part of artificial intelligence that we don't talk about a lot as a community, because a lot of the focus, as you know, is on machine learning and deep learning, but we shouldn't forget that knowledge engineering and knowledge science is one of the key aspects of AI. On the more AI side of personalization, some of the things that we're working on are to take data and use it to make predictions about, let's say, a small business's cash flow. Cash flow forecasting is one of those problems which is perennial for small businesses. You know, a while back I used to run a small business, and I remember at the time wanting to know how much am I going to make, what are my outlays going to be, and whether I'm going to be able to meet the demand or not. And having an AI-powered solution that can use my data in order to help me make those predictions and assessments would be powerful. Those are the types of capabilities that we're building on the machine learning side to help drive personalization.
And I know that this has not completed, but you guys have recently acquired a company, Credit Karma, which is a very data-driven business.
Yeah, that's in the works, and we're about it.
Yeah. Sandra, how is Chase using kind of data and AI to sort of get your consumers?
Yeah, there are a couple different ways. I mean, I think at the core of our mission statement is to help our customers make the most of their money. So as we think about what that means, it's really helping give them the best possible advice about the financial products they need to make sure that they can achieve their goals. And so as you think about personalization in particular, one thing that we've done is that we've built a personalization engine that powers all of the advertising units on that engine is now linked to our other channels as well. So we actively prioritize what are the messages we send our customers to make sure they're contextually relevant for that customer at that moment. So we will send you things that seem related to what you would need, whether it's a servicing related message or an engagement related message, or if it's an additional product that you might be needing that you don't yet know about. But we are also looking at multiple levels of personalization. So that is the ad units writ large and what message to share. We've also been working to personalize the messages themselves. So instead of stock types of messages, we're now able to say, hey, Ravi, we think you can auto save $300 a month, not just, hey, think about saving. And we've deployed some really interesting capabilities in our mobile application to create these snippets of insights that are personalized and contextual for our customers as well. So those are some of the pieces that we've started with. We've got lots of data around how our customers engage with us. So I think the big next step is going to be figuring out how we use that to help get ahead of customer issues themselves, that people don't have to call us or have to come in to get something fixed, that we fix it automatically. And so that's kind of the next to run, is getting ahead of the issues.
And do you see kind of opportunities? I know both of you don't sell your data, but do you see opportunities to help kind of other products, other business units, potentially creating some sort of internal data marketplace? Sandra, how do you think of data in that sense?
Yeah, so we're pretty careful as how we think about monetizing our data, right? We definitely do not sell our data. And as we think about creating value from the data, first and foremost, it is about using those insights to power our basic products. So we use our card data to make better card products and to serve our customers well. We do think about using our data for things like safety and soundness. So if there are ways that our data can help the firm overall be safer and avoid risk, we think about those types of uses. But we are not trying to enter into any use of data in, for example, the consumer data in the wholesale space that would contravene those types of policies. We're trying to be we've drawn a pretty hard line.
Ashok, to help other products in your business, the use of data?
So within Intuit, we do use data subject to the privacy constraints and other constraints that we have. We use it in order to help drive better personalized experiences like we described a moment ago. But there are certain data sets that we can't use, and we stay away from those because of privacy reasons or regulatory reasons from the IRS and other types of things. But generally speaking, within the company, we want to use whatever information that we have that can be used in order to drive the best customer experience.
Got it. There's a great question that, I'll bring up here. And this particular candida asks, so data and AI are being used to make decisions. You know, a lot of decisions within your own business, decisions that affect and impact kind of your consumers or customers. Is there a way to provide visibility to the consumer about whom this decision is being made?
Yes, I'll take that. And I think we absolutely provide transparency into both data and how data is used about a customer pursuant to all of the different regulations that are out there. Right out, when we underwrite a customer where we are providing credit, whether we approve or decline a customer, we are required to provide a reason for that. And so that is made very transparent to the customer. If someone today lives in California, they have the right to the data that we have on them and how it is being used. And under GDPR, there's even greater ability to get both data and how data is processed and information about that. But that's pretty much what we do, is we do it pursuant to those regulations, and we have mechanisms and intake forms to process those requests.
Sure.
Yeah, in our case with CCPA and GDPR, those areas of compliance are there and in force, and we're completely in agreement and in compliance with it. The one area that I'd like to discuss here is the area of explainable AI, because I think that that's related in some ways to the question that was asked. So we want to create, and we are creating, explainable capabilities so that if a person is having, let's say, a loan or something like that, we want to be able to explain why that loan was approved or why that loan was declined. And this is through the use of explainable models, I should say. And we're investing a lot in building such models so that we can have an informed understanding about what's happening.
One of the questioners here is asking about, we talked a lot about data and AI, to improve customer experiences, to drive personalization. And so the questioner is asking, and I know this is a big topic, so probably a brief answer, how are you using data and AI agents? And they suggest an example, which is post-crisis, will you see more data-driven automation? You want to take that, Sandra? Sandra, you're muted.
Yeah, I think we're clearly using data, analytics, and a bunch of methodologies to always improve our processes. What we see is that typically the places where we have inefficiency are also the places where our customer experience is broken, so the two go hand in hand. And so we're absolutely using things like AI models to ensure we're queuing calls, for instance, properly and in the most efficient ways. Does that lead to efficiency in terms of job losses? In some cases, yes, but we also have a lot of countervailing measures. There's actually work being done to retrain those same people who might be subject to job loss through automation in the skills of the future. And I'm sponsoring personally people who are now learning analytics and how to code, who are part of the cohort that might end up being automated. And so I think we, at least as a company, are trying to find that balance, knowing that the right thing to do for our customers is to build a better experience that is more efficient, but we need to be human and take care of our employees as well.
Ashok, around people, processes, systems, how is AI impacting your organization?
So AI plays an incredibly important role in making customer experiences better, and in fact, in also helping other parts of our ecosystem, for instance, the accountant part of the ecosystem, the bookkeeping part of our ecosystem. These are people who are often running a small firm, maybe they work for themselves, and they want to tap in, help more people than what's in their general catchment area. So catchment area, what I mean by that is, generally speaking, if you're in a small account of 1 or 2 employees, people that you work with are generally people that are physically near you. We've created some new capabilities. One of them is called TurboTax Live, which actually helps connect people, so customers that are out there, with the experts so that they can get the best information at the best time in the right way. And we're identifying and doing matchmaking, as we call it, between the consumers and between the experts using AI. So sure, it's being used for driving a great customer experience, but it's also being used in a way that really helps our accountants and the other people in our ecosystem become more productive. So it's exciting to see that, because oftentimes AI is cast as something that leads to an efficiency. Efficiency is often meant in terms of stop change or something like that. In our case, it's really not about that. It's really about bringing the right people to the right expert and doing it in as fast and an efficient way. That's a major area of work for Intuit, and certainly for my team.
Good. So let's kind of dive into now the sort of the privacy side, and so we'll kind of we'll deal with a bunch of kind of topics here. And before we get into sort of how you're dealing with privacy from a data management side, I want to first focus on how it has changed the way you interact with your customers and consumers. What has changed? So we've seen first kind of vertical industry, financial services, healthcare, vertical industry-based regulations, and then you started seeing regional, Switzerland, GDPR, and California, and now there's going to be a hodgepodge of different privacy regulations in the US. How has this changed the way you interact with customers? Have they seen, has it added features, changed features? How is the customer experience being different?
Yeah, I'd say what's interesting is that banks have been regulated with respect to privacy for decades, right? So we have our own host of regulations related to what we can and can't do with data that existed even before GDPR and CCPA. Those introduced some overlays with respect to some narrow parts of data that we had other regulations that entailed, but in general, it didn't change anything specifically. What did change for us is actually just really regarding the broader change in customer expectations around not even just privacy, but how data is being used. And we don't use privacy and data use interchangeably within Chase. To me, data use is something we look to that is a higher order that goes above and beyond just what is the letter of the law from a privacy perspective, and really takes into account what we talked about before, that point around customer expectation for how their data can and should be used. And we try to hold ourselves to something higher. I think just the broader change in customer expectation that became heightened obviously reset what we think it makes sense based on that. So, but ultimately privacy itself and some of those regulations didn't change anything other than having to have intake forms for some of those things specifically.
Ashok, I know that your team has been spending a lot of time on CCPA, and so how has that changed the customer experience?
Ravi, it's a great question. So certainly as CCPA came to fruition, we did a lot of work to create customer experiences to enable what are called data rights. So the ability to access data, ability to delete data, the ability to know what data is available on a person and so forth. So those experiences are there. But what really I think is exciting about this area in data privacy is to build capabilities that allow large companies like ours or other companies to do what I call and I think about as data privacy and data governance by design. So imagine having systems that automatically adapt to privacy landscape that we find ourselves in, the changing regulatory landscape, and also to the changing consumer preferences, because my preference as a consumer could change this minute. Right now, I could say, I don't want to be involved with something, or I do want to be involved with something, or I want my data to be used. We could get new regulations very quickly, right? And rather than being in a reactive mode where we say, oh, this thing is coming, now let's make this change, let's go and architect a new system. What I'm excited about is thinking about building systems that actually naturally can adapt to these changes, that can take in that information about that changing landscape and make the And as those changes get made, it's really important, again, going back to explainability, that people, who are in regulatory bodies, people who are within the company that need to monitor what's happening, and others have visibility into what's going on. So that's kind of a long-term vision of it, but I'm pretty excited about it because I've seen kind of the beginnings of that being done with a great deal of, frankly, customer benefit, but also a great deal of integrity and power in terms of knowledge of how the data is being used.
In security, folks like I presume your CISO and so forth develop sort of these threat models, and they analyze them and in some sense leverage those threat models to sort of develop their response. What are you thinking about sort of threat models in the privacy context?
Yeah, I mean, I link all of these things together, and it's an interesting conversation that we have internally, which is if you think of data use, which I think of as the highest bar, that we're using the data in the best possible ways, there are a number of controls or state prevent bad things from happening. The first and foremost does and prevent external threats, right? If actors cannot come in, that is one first line in the sand that prevents bad data use. Second is internal threat. Bad actors getting access to systems they can't, and that they shouldn't intentionally, right? Second thing the CISO does. Then it starts to be the realm of the chief data officer, where my team gets engaged, where we start to think about things like data access writ large and who has access to what, because clearly if you don't have access, you can't use it. So how do we make data access controls are correct, even internally with good actors can't misuse data unknowingly? And then finally, even if they can access, making sure you have the appropriate checkpoints. We have internal checkpoints where before something is used, they have to get permission for specific types of use cases. Essentially has to come through a committee that I sit on. And so you have many, many like chains of responsibility before something actually gets through and is able to be used. Essentially, if it is something that is novel and new, clearly you don't want to get in the way of innovation that is more of the BAU nature, a team doing the basic stuff day in, day out. You don't want to have to make them go through 10 committees to get their job done, but you want to be able to, anything that is net new using sensitive data, you do want to put those stage gates in place and have senior leaders looking at these
Ashok, anything?
Yeah, Ravi, we follow a similar approach. Our CISO is involved with multiple levels of identifying external and internal threats. And as the chief data officer, I'm also involved with some areas, but then extending, in Sandra said, into the governance of the privacy of the data and how we use it. The way I think about this is that we need to be constantly vigilant, obviously on the security side, but also on the side of how the data is being used and where the data is being used, the use cases, and so forth. The types of models that I was discussing before in the AI realm, are they explainable? Where do we need the explainability? Where is that explainability going to really drive us to better conclusions? That's a whole realm of work which requires, frankly, pretty specialized knowledge, both of data, but then also of modeling capabilities, and then also of the customer experience. So those three things come together in a nice way. And to directly answer your question, we're spending a lot of effort thinking about that and building policies and frameworks to address.
You don't have to answer this, but in the privacy space, consumers see another sort of threat, the threat of kind of Big Brother. And so the government or who are, is something that an individual is concerned about, which typically is not the case in privacy. Switching to now kind of the operational side and kind of how your sort of data management, data governance, the storage and transmission of sort of data, how have these sort of evolved with sort of CCPA, GDPR, and these new regulations. Ashok, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I touched on it already. I mean, we built the capability to stay compliant with CCPA. That's working out very well. Similarly with GDPR and any new regulation that comes, we'll be doing that. But the common thread that I've seen here, as well as in previous companies, is the ability to quickly adapt our systems to the changing policies, the changing frameworks that are coming down. That's where I'd like to invest time and effort, and I know that other teams within the company are thinking about that, so that we're proactive rather than reactive, so that we are thinking about what the best experience is for the customer. That's generally the direction that we're headed. I anticipate new regulation to come down. I think it's appropriate, and I am looking forward to building those capabilities if we need to, or if we can create those kind of self-adaptive systems. That would be very interesting also. We're a company that is expert in compliance. We help other people stay in compliance with, let's say, the taxes. This is just another element of compliance that we can think about and use technology in order to make sure that we're being as proactive as possible.
And maybe just to follow up on that before I come to you, Sandra. So our friend Alex here asks a question. What guide, because you're a product company and you have developers developing applications, what kind of guidance do you give to your application developers? Mm-hmm. And then kind of how does that sort of go? How does it go through some sort of legal review, go through a privacy office? How is it sort of organized?
Yeah. So as models are built, they go through a number of different reviews. There's the customer experience review. There's a review to say, how is this model going to be used? Is the data that's being used in that model appropriate? What are the safeguards that we're looking at? There is a review from me in my capacity, not only leading AI, but as the chief data officer. Our privacy teams are closely involved with this. So our chief privacy officer and I work closely together to make sure of this. There are written internal principles that govern this. And again, tying back to my previous comments, what we're really thinking about is creating automation to ensure that as code and models are developed, that they are in compliance with that. Right now, I would say it's much more of a manual process, but we really want it to be part of the development framework that our developers have. It's a very exciting concept, in my opinion, because that would allow us then to build and deploy at scale while building that personalization, building the compliance framework directly into the product.
Sandra, how are your operations being changed because of all these regulations?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo what Ashok is saying. The way we approach when a model is being built for a new product, it goes through almost exactly same type of thing. There's a council that meets that includes everything from privacy, fair lending, cybersecurity, other parts of legal compliance, model governance, controls, to review it to make sure that it is sound before we put it into production. And so we have a very similar view, but I also would echo what he says around the idea of privacy by design or just data management by design. Data and analytics feel like they are at a place where probably software development writ large was 20 years ago, where things were still pretty manual in terms of tooling, testing, automation. I think we are at the forefront of a lot of real innovation in the data management space, of which I think privacy and the ability to tag certain data elements as privacy related for specific data management functionality, it's just one piece of a bigger data management whole. And that ability to innovate the entire stack, whether it's the storage and infrastructure, the data movement, or the consumption layers itself, that is a big deal for us. And it's actually, I know it's not a sexy topic, but it's a pretty sexy topic in terms of the outcomes for what it will mean for our ability to innovate and drive more efficiency and effectiveness on the analytics side, which is the value creation, as well as really streamline but also harden our ability to manage controls from a data perspective.
And especially not sexy, because most organizations data is in silos, and it's just a kind of a big kind of mishmash of things.
Yeah, and governance is not usually a topic that excites people's interest. It's usually something you check the box on and go do. But the clear example where improvement of governance practices is a win-win, right? You actually do drive efficiency and effectiveness for the business, and you're able to streamline and harden your controls.
As your organization is leveraging kind of third-party cloud apps, is there a sort of a kind of a review of what apps are being used with what data from a privacy perspective?
Yeah, it's very similar
Absolutely.
to what I mentioned.
I'll just take that one.
Oh, you go ahead, Ashok.
Ashok, go ahead.
I was just going to absolutely that review when we engage with third parties is always being done, and it's a big part of the way we conduct our engagement.
Sandra, you were
Yeah,
saying
I'd say it's very similar to what I mentioned about how we think about the model governance and the AI governance as well. Everything that we are doing in cloud also goes through that same council that I mentioned. But in addition, there's a separate cloud council consisting of, again, some senior technologists, architects, and CISOs who also review independently outside of the council that I manage. And so it goes through a similar set of governance before we put things out, both in terms of the application and the data itself.
Got it. A question that someone has here is, as all of our workforces, I presume Chase and Intuit also get more distributed, people work from home, people work from different countries. How is it impacting sort of the data that you are of, and what are sort of the privacy threats of sort of this growing model?
Yeah, I think the way we've tackled that, and the good news is we had tackled a lot of this because we had virtualized our desktops for majority of the workforce across JPMC. So when you think about even me accessing my work desktop here from my home, I'm really accessing it through the cloud. None of it is ever resident on my computer. I don't have the ability to print from home. So when you think about the ability to extract private data at large, we continue to find ways to plug those gaps to ensure those things can't happen. So it's not something that I think we worry about all that much, because the model we've adopted for how our employees even interact with our systems is already pretty well managed.
So basically virtual desktops which are sort of locked down.
Correct.
Ashok?
Yeah. So our workforce is at home, and there are a number of layers of both security and privacy elements that we're employing to ensure that the data that we have stays in the places that it should be, and that the access protocols are not broken. So a unique thing about Intuit is that we have a very large set of experts that I was mentioning earlier that we work with, and we've created the ability to ensure security and privacy and all the things that we've been talking about in that context, and a lot of those learnings transfer into the current world also. So there are many different areas that we're working on in that regard.
Thank you. So switching to the next topic, which is around technology and innovation. There's a lot of technology coming out. I'll just name a few: secure multi-party computing, homomorphic encryption, differential privacy, and so on and so forth, which allows for kind of privacy-preserving computing. So, and I'll take an example. A lot of people are worried about AI, machine learning type models, and they're worried that there is actually leakage that could happen to the models. And so how is Chase thinking about sort of using some of these technologies? Will financial services be sort of early adopters of these technologies?
I'm not so sure, and I'm just not as big a fan of some of these things, because I think they are efforts to abstract from the difference between the letter of the regulation and customer expectation. These are trying to get at the letter of regulation, which says, I don't know the data is yours and hence therefore I can use it. But customers, even the research that we've done, it doesn't matter if you're linking the data to them directly or not. There are certain uses that they don't want the data to be used for, and just trying to abstract the data in some way and still use it feels disingenuous. So we are going to continue to focus on just going through the processes that we have today and trying to make sure that the data we use is in line with those expectations. I do think there's some of these technologies, as we think about sharing data with third parties for expected uses, where in those cases there may be trade secrets in the data that we don't necessarily want to share directly, but shared data could be interesting. But I don't expect this to be something that we're going to be using from a privacy perspective anytime soon.
Ravi, I have a similar point of view. You know, the security and privacy of the data is first and foremost, and so we want to emphasize that. But if if we have data which is secured, let's say it's encrypted, and we are within the customer expectations, we are within privacy rules and regulations and so forth into its own data stewardship principles, we want to access it. It's an interesting question to say, how does one do machine learning on encrypted data? And that encryption could be done, and is usually done for security purposes. That's an important area. What's, I'd say, equally important is that this is still not something that can be put into production. Homomorphic encryption, techniques like this still require a tremendous amount of computing power, but I think it's an important area, because it would be an ideal situation if, again, given the governance, privacy rules, given the customer expectations, if we are able to use that data to drive a good experience, the ideal case would be that that data is completely encrypted, right? And it stays in that encrypted format, and we're doing the analysis. That means that no one can really break into it. But it's still a ways, not just Intuit, but I'd say the industry is a ways from being able to really deploy that at scale.
And especially if you're using any kind of third-party service, if you're using, for example, a cloud AI service of some kind from Google or Facebook or something like that, you have a challenge because you've encrypted sort of sensitive data, and they may not be able to deal with it.
Absolutely. And in many cases, we just simply don't allow data to leave into it. So it's a, I would say, a highly governed approach that we're taking, which says that the data that Intuit has stays within Intuit's bounds unless there's a well understood, well-known exception.
Sandra, there's a question directed at you, which is about kind of the software platform. I think you mentioned about context-aware computing. And can you just kind of expand a little bit more on that?
So I think this was related to what I was saying about our personalization stack. We use a series of vendors. I don't think we talk about them publicly, but we use a series of third-party vendors to deliver the decision engine, intake, content management, in order to deliver our personalization. We couple that with a lot of internal features, not just our general analytics big data platform, but also operational data stores that are domain driven to feed specific areas that we know targeting, eligibility, suppressions, things like that are all ready to feed into the decision engine, which then is where we house the machine learning and AI platform.
So maybe to wrap up, there are other sort of chief data officers and chief analytics officers who are as much in the forefront as you are, because you are dealing with sort of consumers and small businesses. So you've had to deal with these regulations. I'm wondering if you can kind of, people who are sort of earlier in this journey, if you can give them some advice on maybe top 3 things, Sandra, maybe starting with you, on what they should do or not do.
I think when it comes to privacy, it's always thinking about customer expectations. I don't think in this day and age it's good enough to just listen to the letter of the law and deliver against that. I think you have to think about what is right for your customers, because ultimately, if you do right by your customers, I do think the economics and the business models always end up making the end. So I'd encourage people to really think carefully about customer expectations. I make sure that you're a controlled process in place to make these decisions. These are not decisions that you can delegate down to very junior people until you've got a good set of case law about what is and isn't allowed that's been established by senior executives, and that takes time. At which point you can start to federate or automate some of those decisions around access and use. But in the very beginning, this is something that needs to be a senior executive decision, and have fun with it. I think AI is a great space. I think data management, as I mentioned before, there's tons of opportunity for innovation, and realizing that that innovation is out there and it isn't a space that you just have to check the box and do your job, that it's a space that you can continuously improve and innovate, keeps it fun. So I encourage people to have fun with it.
So kind of privacy needs to be a C-level kind of focus area and not sort of pushed down, way down the organization.
I think in the beginning you need to have, it doesn't need to be C-level directly, but it needs to be a senior executive who is accountable, understands the balance between customer expectations, business objectives, feels accountable for both of those things, as well as regulatory response, and is able to make good informed decisions across all of those venues and come out the other end okay.
Ashok?
Put the customer first, just like Sandra said. Look at the use and the world through his or her eyes, and that will help guide you well and talk to customers, really engage with them. We have a rather important process within Intuit, which we call Follow Me Homes. Our founder created this notion, Follow Me Home, where you actually go and you see people in their workspace using the software, using the technologies that you're building, and understand from their point of view at a very personal level how they view things. So I'd say first and foremost, just as Sandra said, put the customer experience first. I think that I would also ensure that I have a team that is thinking about these things on a daily basis rather than having it an add-on to other teams to solve. So certainly get the right principles, get the right guidelines, work with the legal teams and the privacy teams, customer experience teams in order to get that information, write down the guidelines, federate them within the company and so forth. But then a team whose job is to take that and see how it's implemented, see what variations need to be, so that it's, in many ways, it has a consistent approach across the company. The third thing that I would do is build for the future, not just the present. I think that compliance type things are often, you know, as Sandra said, a check the box thing, like, yeah, we're in compliance. But frankly, being more proactive and being further looking can be very beneficial. It can lead to speed, it can lead to efficiency. And most importantly, it can lead to a better customer experience, because if you anticipate what's coming and you hardened your systems for that already, then when it comes, it's not a big deal for you, and it's setting exactly right with the customer. So those are 3 ideas that I have.
And as a follow-up to that, is there a big kind of operationally is dealing with sort of privacy compared to 10 years ago? Is there a big kind of operational cost of dealing with the privacy? I understand your perspective that it is what's right for the customer, but does it add a big cost to operations?
From a bank perspective, it does initially, because the way we are able to comply with bank-specific privacy was always more account level. And as customer level privacy regulations came about, we did need to restructure, reorganize to ensure that we could answer things at a customer and aggregated level across multiple lines of business. And so that was something that was an initial investment in cost, but to be frank, having that infrastructure in that is also beneficial for other things from a business perspective and helps us drive some of the personalization agenda. So we looked at it as in that you'd make for the regulatory purposes, but we should be making it anyway.
Great. So that concludes our event today. I really thank you, Ashok and Sandra, for participating. And I'll net it out saying, don't be like that social media company. Keep your customers' interests first, and business comes after that. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.